Welcome to section 11, and in this particular section we're going to add the image upload functionality into our application. And let's take a look at the learning goals for this one, and we're going to implement that functionality and gain an understanding of the following. What we'll take a look at very next is the options we have for where to store photos, and there are different options for this. And we're also going to take a look at adding related entities. What we're going to do with our photo entity is not allow it to be added directly, but it's going to have to be added via a user entity, and we'll take a look at that in this particular section. We're going to take a look at using a third-party API, which will give you a clue as to what we're going to do for our photo storage options, and we're going to run through the debugger again because the logic involved in what we're doing here is worth taking a look at step by step to see what's going on as things are happening. And we're also going to look at updating and deleting resources in our API controller. And specifically, we're going to take a look at what to return when we're creating resources in a REST-based API. Now, if you're not familiar what a REST-based API is, then REST is representational state transfer, which is a software architecture style that defines a set of constraints to be used when creating web services. And what our goal is, and we're going to be pragmatic about this, is we're going to try and conform to this set of conventions as much as possible and go a long way to creating what's referred to as a RESTful web service. I'm not going to say our application is going to be RESTful. This is a set of standards that apply to any type of API, and we're working in the confines of ASP.NET, so we're going to be pragmatic about it. But what we are going to do is return the correct responses from each of our API controller endpoints. And there is a specific request to return or a specific response to return when creating resources in an API. So what we're going to take a look at first of all is just where do we store our photos, and there are choices. And option number one is to store the photos in a database as binary large objects. This is entirely possible. But this is not a great use of a database. It's not efficient at serving binary large objects. A database is efficient at returning our data or our relational data. When it comes to large objects, then sure, it can do that, but that's not its primary task, and it's not optimized for doing that kind of thing. We also need to be concerned about how much space we're using in our database, as if we're hosting our own server, then we're going to have an amount of space to work with, and running out of space on a server is not a good thing, because that's when your web services are going to start to crash, because they're no longer going to be able to log whatever's going on because there's no disk space. Another option is the file system on our server, and this is a viable option because file systems are obviously optimized for serving files. So if we store files on a file system and return them from there, of course, that would be fine. But it does have a downside, or there's a couple of downsides. First of all, we've got the space issue once again. We need to be careful about how much we store in our file system. Do we have a limited amount of storage to work with? Now, storage is cheap, but again, running out of storage on your file server is a bad thing, especially if that file server is running on the same server as your web services. Also, when it comes to storing on the file system, how do you want your photos to be stored? Do you need to care about the aspect ratio of the images? And if you do, and then you've got something else to take care of, because the users may not realize that you only want square images on your site, and you could enforce that kind of thing, but it does give you some extra logic to work with and think about when using the file system. Another option is to use a cloud service, and this one doesn't have the disadvantages of the database and the file system when it comes to storage. This can be virtually unlimited, but obviously when you're using a service like this, there would be a cost if you wanted to create the next Instagram. What a service does do though, if we use a cloud service, then we can use the logic that they provide to transform the images into the aspect ratios that we want on our site. Now, we're going to be a square image site because it makes our styling easier. So we're just going to be using Square Images. And the option that we're going to be using for photo storage is a service called Cloudinary. And Cloudinary provides a free tier, no credit card required, and we get 10 gigabytes of storage for free with this, and they provide a way for us to transform the images uploaded on that backend server. So it's something that we don't need to take care of ourselves. So if we take a look at what we're going to be doing with the image uploads, first of all, a client is going to drag and drop an image into our Angular application. And what we want to make sure of is that only authenticated users can upload images to our server. So step number one, the client's going to upload the photo to the API, and it's going to use their JWT token to authenticate to the server. What we're going to do next is securely upload the photo to Cloudinary, because Cloudinary is going to give us some API keys that we can use so that we can guarantee that only our server has the ability to upload to our Cloudinary account. Cloudinary stores the photo and sends the response, and the API is going to save the URL of where the photo is, and what we'll get from Cloudinary is a public ID of the image, and that's going to be saved into the database. And when it is, it's going to be given the auto-generated ID from our database, and this is what we're going to return to the client. And what we return from when we create a resource on a server is a 201 created response. Now this kind of response has to have the location of the resource that's been created inside the header in the response. And we also return the object as well, because if we're creating a new photo in our users collection, then the client, when it creates the resource, it doesn't know what its URL is going to be. It doesn't know what its ID is going to be. So what we'll need to do is return that object to the client so the client can work with it on that side of things. So this is what we're going to be approaching and doing in this section, and let's get started.